Okay, everyone, welcome back to Stats Edge Trading. Not only we are doing the weekly wrap up right now, but we're actually doing the monthly wrap up because we have brand new and fresh monthly candlesticks to keep an eye on. So it's going to be a bit. So make sure you grab your coffee, have a sit down. Let's go through crypto. Let's go through FX. Let's go through the equity markets. Give some ideas that I'm generating from these algos that I'm talking about and sharing on Twitter. If you're not following me on Twitter, it's right below me right now. Make sure you do that. And as always, go to statsedgetrading.com, sign up for the email list there so I can email you these videos when they come out, along with some bonus kind of screenshot and written commentary for those that like their information in written form. Now, let's get started here with Bitcoin, which is actually pushing down a little bit today. We're going to take a look at the weekly chart. Let's actually start monthly first. So looking at this monthly chart, I love zooming out like this, that you only get to do once a month when there's a monthly closing candle. And this is something that my buddy JC at All Star Charts taught me to do a while ago, where regardless of your time frame, if you're a day trader, if you're a short-term swing trader, or if you're a long-term investor, zooming out to get a little bit of a broader picture makes a lot of sense. And we have Bitcoin butting up here against new all-time highs. We had the guy who you could argue caused this collapse, that Sam Bankman-Fried, sentenced to 25 years in prison for his fraud, which is great. Market seemed to have liked that. We got a little bit of move after that as well. But again, just a nice base up here, all-time highs. I've talked about this a few times on weekly wrap-ups and other videos that I've done, where if you have a move from 70,000 all the way down to 15,000 and then it runs back up to 70,000, you would imagine there's going to be some overhead supply there. There's going to be some people who were underwater for a very long period of time and lost a huge amount of money on an unrealized basis, potentially looking to exit the second it gets back to that recent high. So that's what we're seeing on the monthly chart. It almost reminiscent of what's happened back here to get us to that high, but still we're only up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months in a row. So if it's going to take a little bit of a much needed break, I think this is a place to do it. That doesn't call for another entire bear market or crypto winter or anything like that. It just says, hey, you've moved pretty far, pretty fast. A rest would make sense, but this is also Bitcoin. So there's nothing saying that it has to do that. On the weekly chart, more struggle. We're now kind of 3 weeks in a row. Every time you see candles like this that have topping tails and bottoming tails kind of throughout, it just shows you there's a little bit of indecision going on. So today we're getting a little bit of a sell-off, but really still kind of an inside day. So as long as we are above or around 70,000, I think that's fine. If we break under maybe 60,000, it might be time for a little bit of a revision to the mean play, but we are just chopping around there on Bitcoin. And again, we're at these all-time highs, so that's perfectly expected. There's nothing here that looks bearish to me at all. However, if we are going to get a sell-off in Bitcoin, if we go to the Ethereum monthly chart, you can see way less way less excitement in Ethereum that there has been in Bitcoin. Still a great looking chart, especially if you go to this weekly chart right here. It's a little bit weaker on the weekly chart, and it hasn't even gotten to new all-time highs yet. So it still has that hurdle if it ever gets up there, just showing that potentially we have this all-time highs struggle inside of Ethereum. And as someone who's a relative strength trader, which essentially just means I want to buy the strongest stuff out there, Ethereum is not it right now. Now, Dogecoin seems to be popping up its little head. Speaking of relative strength, it's actually broken out this week as opposed to Bitcoin and Ethereum that are chopping around. Dogecoin still has 5x it has to go until it gets to all-time highs. So there's still a long way to go before it gets there. However, it's put in this nice big long rounded bottom type pattern, and it looks like it may be perking up here, getting through this prior resistance that it had in that November 2022. It's broken through that, and a nice weekly close here in 2 days, barring nothing's happened there. And the monthly chart, right? This looks like quite a little breakout on Doge on the monthly chart. So maybe for the people who are Dogecoin addicts, might be time to take a look at that. However, what I would do is just keep a very close eye on this weekly chart. If this breakout fails to stick and we can end up selling back down here, that would be a little bit of a room to exit. Now, the beauty of these altcoins, which is the nice terminology for them, is that you have to apply way less capital. So, from here to your risk, you're talking nearly 50% to your risk. And if you're right, and it gets to all-time highs and through it, you're talking of 5 times your money. So that just shows that if you're risking 50% on the actual position, that the amount of capital you have to assign to something like that is just way less. That's why I like things like this, is because I can take less of my overall net worth and apply it to that and still get a decent return if I end up being right. So keeping an eye going through the list here, let's take a look at gold. We have a new all-time monthly closing high, which is fantastic. And we have a new all-time weekly closing high, which is also fantastic. So there's nothing that we can say in gold other than I'm glad to be long some. I'm not going to be buying anything up here, and I see no reason to short. Just continues to move. Now, just like we talked about with Ethereum and with Bitcoin, how Bitcoin was over pacing Ethereum, and we had gold now outpacing silver. So silver still can't get going above this level right here for the longest time. We're just struggling at that zone. And for me, that makes, if I'm thinking that gold is going to cool off at some point, it's going to calm down, it's going to sell off, or it's going to base at all, and I wanted to take a short play, I'm not going to go to gold because that's an incredibly strong chart. But if silver can't stick this breakout, and it's tried now 3 or 4 times, that's going to be my target. I'm going to look to take a short on the silver market there. So, it's just the way it goes. I want to buy the strongest stuff, and if I want to sell or I want to short, I'm going to pick the weakest. And you, generally speaking, want to see an silver being, it's called the crazy cousin of gold, right? It does whatever gold does, but just to the extreme. And in this case, it's not breaking out with gold. It's not moving it at all. So if there's something to short in the gold silver market, then it would be the silver market, but I have no reason to do that yet. If we go to DXY, which is our dollar index, on the weekly chart, did almost nothing, right? Had a nice little up and down move, and it barely made a little bit of ground, but didn't really do anything. If we go to the monthly chart, again, we're still in smack dab in the middle of this range, just as middle of the range as you can get. And then on the weekly chart, we are still in the middle of the range. So currency trading is going to be complicated until we get a breakout one way or the other. I'm always looking at the euro and then the pound, and then comparing that to the dollar as well. So this chart looks just the opposite, which makes sense. I think DXY is like 70% euro. So this makes sense as well. Again, we still have a lot of resistance in this area right here, or support potentially in this area. If we start to see a bounce up, we have the anchored VWAP from the swing low and the anchored VWAP from the swing high. And then the last time we were in this zone, we found a lot of buyers, whereas the pound, same kind of thing, right? We had some buyers in the zone. We had this anchored VWAP acting as support. Talked about this last week, a little bit of bounce off this as well. So wouldn't shock me, looking under the hood, if we see a little bit of back and forth here on the dollar. 2 other currencies I wanted to talk about was the yen and the franc. And the yen is very interesting because the Bank of Japan is doing all kinds of stuff that I don't understand. I'm not an economist, but trying to defend their currency. And we're back up against this zone right here. So a bunch of, I guess, Japanese bankers, central bankers have come out and said, we're going to defend our currency. And we have this high right here. So if I go, sorry, I wanted to cue this up, but if I go to FinViz and I take a look at the positioning data on the pound, you can see that everybody is short the yen. Everybody is betting that this breakdown on this chart is going to continue, and they're all betting that this breakout on this chart is going to continue as well. Often, the crowds are wrong. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be, but I will be watching this support area for a quick trade on maybe the 4-hour time frame into next week. If we break down under this support right here, simple place for a stop loss order so you can get multiple times your risk there, just in case everybody is wrong. Speaking of that kind of same concept, we have the Swiss franc. So the Swiss franc has been bouncing pretty dramatically, or selling off. This is an inverted chart, but selling off to this major anchor VWAP and put in a pretty decent looking hammer candle or topping tail candle here as well. And if we go to the positioning on that, everybody, both the small speculators and the large speculators, are incredibly short the franc, which would mean long this chart right here. For me, being long after a giant move like this on something that doesn't trend like stocks does, currencies are a little bit more revision to the mean oriented than stocks, makes me think that it's probably not the time to join that crowd. And like I talked about before, on the shorter term chart, it may be time to go with the crowd if we do get some sort of failure here on that chart. So that's what I'll be watching on the franc next week. Now let's pop into trades here and let's start looking through some overall different equities. And we're going to start with the S&P 500, of course, on the weekly chart. And technically not an inside week, but essentially an inside week, right? We broke very, very briefly on that. If you want to get really anal about your definitions, then yes, it wasn't an inside week, but as close as you could get to that. And we still have this upward trend. There's no reason to potentially short this trend. I've seen everybody under the sun saying we have to take a break. I think that at some point we should take a break, but we don't have to, right? And until people give up that idea that the market has to take a break, makes me think it's not going to happen again. The idea that most people are generally wrong when it comes to these things. But what I wanted to show, if we go over to the Qs here, you can see the last 5 weeks of the Qs, we've just been basing. We've just been basing sideways in the Qs here. Make sure my presenter software is open. Yeah, we've just been basing sideways here in the Qs, whereas in the S&P 500, we've actually been pushing higher this entire time. So this basically just shows me that tech is starting to rest, and there are other factors, there are other sectors under the hood that are pushing this market continuously higher. If we go to a monthly chart here on the SPY, it's the same story. We're up 6 months in a row, 5 months in a row here. It can happen, right? I just want to show you guys over on this part of the screen right here. This is after the 2020 bounce all the way up to 2021, 2022. The SPY just had this slow grind higher. That's a year and a half, and wouldn't shock me if we get the same type of move here. Right? So everyone who's out there saying we have to sell off, well, that's usually what creates a lack of a sell-off. Here is 2016 up to 2017. Again, about 2 years here. It's like 2018. So yeah, about 2 years full of data, just kind of straight up with just a little bit of a chop right here on the monthly chart. So this is why I find it very important to zoom out, because we have longer term charts that we can deal with, and we can look at these things and say, is this abnormal behavior? It feels like it when you're in the moment and the market just seems to be going up every single day, but when you zoom out, it's really not the case. Now let's take a look at the RSP. So I've explained this before, and I'll just do it briefly, but the S&P 500 is very weighted to the big names out there, your NVIDIAs, your Apples, your Amazons, the big guys that we all know. RSP is the same 500 names, but it's equally weighted. So it gives the smallest S&P 500 name as much weight as the largest S&P 500 name. And you see in this respect that this is still strong, and actually this week closed much stronger. We were closing inside when it came to the S&P 500, and we've pushed up and we're closing outside when it comes to the RSP, or the equal weighted version of the S&P 500. So good strength there in the RSP, showing that, again, it's not just the big tech guys anymore. There's a lot of movement up under the hood that's keeping this market relatively strong. So let's go to some sectors that I want to keep an eye on. So URA, I've talked about this a few times. This area right here is very interesting to me. It's the lows back in this area and the highs right there as well. So a big zone there at about $27 or so for the uranium ETF. Looks like we could be breaking out here if we can get a little bit of a push above that. That could get me back in and interested in some uranium name. USO is nearing resistance. Oil, right? It's nearing this resistance up here. Again, I've owned some oil from a anchored VWAP in an area that we were talking about right here. I'm going to be more looking to be a seller up in this zone, for at least some of the positions, and then see if I can push off there as well. But if we zoom out to DBC, which is a whole commodities ETF, so this is kind of commodities as a whole. So, wheat and metals and a little bit of everything. Looking like it's starting to perk up here. So could be a rotation out of tech, out of the NVIDIAs and the AI names and everything that's been going crazy and pushing the markets, and more into something like commodities. So this rotation of money from the hot sector to other sectors is a lifeblood of a bull market, and it's exactly what we want to see. KRE is looking interesting here. So this is our regional banks. So these are the guys who were struggling when regional banks were exploding there. This prior high right here at about $48 or $50 a share, we broke it, we pulled back to it, we've rested there for a while, and we had a nice strong candle with a potential breakout. So one of the stocks I have on watch is a regional bank. Looks like we could get some continuation here, and then finally, right, maybe the whole regional bank debacle is behind us. Full disclosure, I always want to say it. I've been, buying this thing in the 40s, so I still do have some regional bank exposure there. Last but not least, for sectors, I want to take a look at XBI. So this is our biotech sector, and I talked about this breakout when it occurred right here. We had prior resistance here and here and here. And then we have support in through there. So now that we've broke it, we got a good little breakout there. Actually got some on that breakout. And then as it came down, I stopped out the rest. But now that we're at this zone, it looks like we're holding. If we start to get a push up on biotechs next week, I want to take a look at that as well. So biotech's interesting. Regional banks, interesting. General commodities seem good as well. And again, that could just be a rotation out of these incredibly high-tech names that have been the things that kept us afloat. So a couple things I wanted to talk about. So again, I've been working with these algorithms, and this may be part of the Substack later. So make sure you're going to statsedgetrading.com. You sign up for the Substack. Been looking for a way to more systematize what it is that I do, where I'm not just looking to create theories and go based off of, hey, I noticed when stocks hit an anchored VWAP that they bounce. I want to be a little bit more precise when it comes to that. So I've been building a lot of these algorithms and testing them and say, okay, is there at least some validity to that? And then not just follow an algorithm blindly, but once I know there's some validity and some statistics behind what it is that I'm doing, then to filter out by eye and say, okay, this is what I like, and then putting that into a Substack. So I have a weekly breakout strategy that you're seeing here, and this week I started to work on an anchored VWAP bounce strategy as well. So for now, I'm just going to include those in these videos, but make sure you're signing up for the Substack, again, over at statsedgetrading.com, because eventually they'll probably move over to there. So the two weekly breakouts, this one actually happened last week, but I like the look of this LYTS, this LSI Industries. You can see here on the monthly chart, I love these picture-in-picture charts they have over at Trade Ideas. If you want to give this a shot, link in the description below. But just a nice way to keep an eye on the longer-term time frame that we're seeing down here. So this is the monthly chart. Really strong on the monthly chart. On the weekly chart, it had been struggling with this area right here. Broke out solidly last week and put a nice little inside this week. So I'm going to watch this one on the daily chart just to see if I can get a trade there. Talked about how one of the names I was interested in was a regional bank, and that's this one here, this HBAN. Nice breakout of this potential kind of cup and handle style look. And this is relatively strong to KRE, or that regional bank index. So if I'm right and the regional bank index continues, then this might be a good target as well. So we go into the anchored VWAP strategy, and let me draw. And the idea is pretty simple. We're looking for stocks to pull into anchored VWAPs from a very significant lows, and then have some sort of bounce off that. The algo I'm working is kind of spitting out these examples and doing a good job of it. And then again, I'm filtering it by eye. The thing I like about this Beam Therapeutics is this really nice low volume controlled pullback and this 18% short float. So I've watched this a few times. What I want to see is a daily close that pushes us off the anchored VWAP, preferably a little bit of volume behind it, but just some sort of signal to the market that yes, we are going to hold this and push higher. If these things just fall apart, I'm just not interested. Other one is BOC, and let's zoom out here. So we have this anchored VWAP from this major low right there, and we have pulled back into that pretty dramatically. And so we've just sold right off into it, and we put in a nice bounce after earnings. So I'm watching this one to see if we retake these highs, just showing that there was a resting order there at that anchored VWAP that the market is interested in. So that's what I'm watching when it comes to that BOC. So those are some names that I'm watching. And that's going to be it for this week. So if you've made it this far, again, please give it a like and a share and all those things that social media nerds tell you to do. Make sure you're going over to statsedgetraining.com. I have a completely free trading course there. You can give a shot. If you want to build your own trading plan and you need kind of assistance how to do that, I have a course on there as well. It's 20 video lessons long. And then always sign up for the free email list. So anything I do in the future, I can email you about as well. So thank you guys very much. Have a good day.